Okay. So our sixth and final chapter of Sefer Yetzirah. And we start with Mishnah Aleph, which says the first Mishnah in Sefer Yetzirah. And I want to thank our sponsor, Rachel Lurie, who's sponsoring the Shir in memory of Sanford Lurie on the occasion of his yahrzeit. May his memory be for a blessing. The first Mishnah, the themes of the first Mishnah have already been mentioned in the earlier chapters, and as is the style of the Sefer Yetzirah, is to go back and re-examine some ideas and mine them for I don't want to say different outcomes, but I would venture to say that the Sefer Yetzirah both explains itself by repeating itself and then adding on, and also confounds itself. It's explanation. It's not necessarily making things clearer by reopening them up and saying something new, because often the new thing seems at face value to contradict an earlier thing. Sometimes it's explaining it, and other times it's making it more confusing, which there's different ways of reconciling kind of the differences. One is, the job that many of the commentators take on, which is to explain how the differences really are not different. They're just coming at it from different vantage points. But sometimes, arguably, it's to create a certain level of complexity, because the very nature of Sefer Yetzirah is complexity, whether it comes into language, the use of language, or mathematics, or some form of geometry, some encoded geometry, and to kind of lend itself to purposely create these kind of layers of complexity. And that would definitely include the sixth chapter. Elohim Shalosh Imos. These are the three mother letters that we were describing at length before. Of all the letters, those three letters get the most of any of the letters. Aleph, Mem, and Shin. Right, and they correspond to air, water, and fire, two different sphirot, and we'll play that out here once again. The Yatzim Hem Shlosha Avot. From the three came out, the three mothers come out three fathers. Earlier, I believe in chapter 2, it uses the expression that the mothers gave birth to the fathers. Here it uses the expression they came out of the mothers. I don't know if you want to read anything into that difference. Perhaps it's just the same thing, different words. And it's interesting that the mother is considered more essential than the father. In other words, the mother gives birth to the father, or in this language, the mother is there and the father is extracted from the mother. V'heim avir ma'im eish, and they are, as we just mentioned, air, water, and fire. Now that's, so we've already have the avot and I'm sorry, the aim and the av, the mom and the father, or plural, imot and avot. And now we get from there shlosh avav v'toldosehem, the three fathers and their descendants. V'shiva kochavim v'tzivosehem, and the 7 stars and their hosts. Notice it switches from toldos to tzvaos, because when we talk about stars, we talk about like section, stars and their hosts. Vishnei Masik Vule Alachson, and the 12 diagonal boundaries. So there's the 7 planets and their hosts, the 12 diagonal boundaries. So the 7 planets that we described, and they connect to the 7 days of the week, they're given birth to by their fathers who came out of the mothers. And then the 12 diagonal boundaries. And Ra'ila Davar, Edim Nemanim Ba'olam, Shana Nefesh, a proof of this is trustworthy witnesses, Ba'olam Shana Nefesh, in space, time, and soul, self. Vishnei Masar Chok v'shiva v'shlosha pikadon beteli v'galgal v'lev. 12 that are rulers, 7 and 3. So we just had 12, 7, 3. So it's just kind of resituating them in the reverse order. And then it's connecting them to Teli. Teli is something that we'll talk about. It might be a Drago, it might be a constellation associated with a dragon. It may be something that's more simple with just an astronomical explanation. And the cycle and the heart. Okay, so let's go over this and point out a few little things here. Okay, we spent a lot of time talking about some of these things in this Mishnah, the Aleph, the Mem, and the Shin, and the air, water, and fire. There was a whole chapter on that earlier. So I'm not going to overly elaborate. We're going to be adding to it a little bit. We also had a chapter on the 7, and then we had a chapter on the 12. So we just did those chapters. Here, we're combining all of those things where like we kind of unfolded them and now we're compacting them back together. A couple things here. One is if I was looking at the language, the words that strike me as parallel to the Mishnah is the avot and the toldot, right? The av and the tolda, which is an expression used in a variety of places in the Mishnah and analyzed in the Talmud, such as Shabbos. Here are the avot melachot. Here are the primary forbidden labors, and here are the toldot. Here are the derivatives. Or in Nezikin and Baba Kama, Arba Avot Nezikin. These are the 4 primary or father responsibilities in terms of things that cause damage that the owners then have to compensate those who are damaged from, and their toldot. It's an expression used by Nigayim, by Tzarat, Avot and Toldot in terms of the colors. Shavuot, it's so reminiscent of Avot and Toldot that I became curious to see, because if it's so clear in it, it seems to probably come after the Mishnah. If I was a scholar And I was just looking at language and saying, where do we know that this language existed in a very clear fashion in the Mishnah? How early could the Mishnayot, didn't have to be necessarily widespread, but it would have to be somewhat known. So that would, but I looked in some other texts. David.
So, Rabbi, are you basically saying here, and I think we were talking after you left last week, I threw in a throwaway comment of saying that, like in the Mishnah, there's six orders of the Mishnah, and in the Sefer Yetzirah, there's 6 chapters. And what you're saying is that maybe the Sefer Yetzirah is a mystical interpretation of the Mishnah. Well, you're not going that far.
Well, the fact that it's called Mishnayot, and you're mentioning a good parallel that it's 6 chapters. It's not. I mean, the Mishnayot has many more than 6 chapters, but it has 6 sidarim, 6 orders. So it could be intentional. That they want to call this the Mishnah of Torah of the Kabbalah of the mystical Torah. The question, there's more in the Graz version of Avot and Toldot that would seem to so it's not really a proof of when the Sefer Yetzirah was written per se, to say, oh, it was definitely after the Mishnah period, because Avot and Toldot, it depends how you use the word. So in the other versions, it just says Avot and Toldot. It doesn't reference back to the way it does in our version of the Gra, where it's more reminiscent even of the Mishnah, where it says Shalosh Imos Yatsu Mehem Shlosh Avot v'Toldosehem Shiva Kochavim v'Sevasem Shnei Mesek V'Leil Asam. It's similar language, but something more striking about the Vilna Gaon's language. But the Vilna Gaon's language was known to try to create symmetry between the Kabbalistic works and the non-Kabbalistic works, and between all of the works. So once he edited something, it kind of in a way takes away from trying to source it in terms of the word, the usage of words. Another interesting thing in terms of words that's similar is this concept of edim nemanim, the trustworthy witnesses. We know that's in the Torah. Edosi b'chem hayom, I call witness today, Shemayim v'aretz, heaven and earth. And heaven is the stars, the sun, and the moon. So it's a reference to that. So it doesn't have to be a reference that's post-Mishnaic or post-Talmudic. It could be just, biblical quotation, but it is reminiscent as well of the Torah, of Medrash and Gemara, that says, that interprets the Bible, that says that who are the witnesses that God is calling in heaven? It's the sun and the moon. You could say the Sefer Yetzirah, the author of the Sefer Yetzirah didn't need to see the Medrash on that. It's obvious, So again, it's not a right, it's not a proof of saying it's post that Medrash. Right, right. This expression, Edim Ne'emanim Ba'olam, like trustworthy witnesses in the world of time and self. Okay, so that's a little bit about that. Let's go to Mishnah 2. Shalosh Imot Aleph Mem Shin Aver Mayim Eish. The 3 mothers, Aleph Mem Shin, they correspond to air, water, and fire. Now we're going to situate them. We already did this, meaning in an earlier chapter, but we're going to do it again. Eish l'mayla, the fire is above. Umayim lamata, and the water is below. By the way, which is interesting because we know there is midrashic sources that talk about the idea of mayim, water as Torah that starts high and then it descends low, like water that starts in, let's say, a cloud or in a mountain, and then descends as rain or as a river and flows downward. V'avir ruach chok machir ben time, and air, which is spirit, is the decider, that mediates between them. And again, it's this concept of the thesis and antithesis and the synthesis that we have these three things, like one's spiritual, one's material, and one is the intermediate between the two. B'simin l'davar, ha'esh nosa es hamayim. A sign for this is that fire, it either could be fire supports water or fire like moves the water. So for example, if you have a huge flame, it kind of like we know the water will put out the flame if you put enough water on it. But if you have a bigger flame than the water, then the fire will actually kind of move the water. It'll like probably dry it up a little bit, or I mean, I don't know what that really means. I'm not a fire expert. Anyone know what that means? That fire could move water?
Well, the only real practical way is the fire, of course, will heat up the water and the water will turn to air.
Okay.
Yes,
The mind is powerful and moves your emotions.
Say it again, Avi.
The mind is powerful, being Aish,
Yeah.
and it can move emotions.
Oh, okay. So
In
if we
water,
look at so we look at fire as the mind moving, controlling the emotions. Okay, good. Even though most of us would see it the opposite. Water is like cool and needs to control the passion of the fire, but the Sefer Yetzirah flips that over.
It can flip over.
Yeah, and it already has. It's not the first, we're just continuing that idea. Now we have mem do mamot. The mem makes a mem mum sound. We call it hum, but the sound. Shin soreket, the shin screams or hisses. Aleph, the aleph is the breath. It's more of a silent sound. Ruach, it's the spirit. Chok machir ben time, and it is the one that is the intermediate between them. Okay. So a little bit here is we're going to be bringing down a lot about this idea of the three. We mentioned already in the first Mishnah the three, and there's the intermediate. So now we're going through how each thing is going to have three, and what the two polar opposites are, and what the negotiator between them is. Okay, so keep that in mind. So it's the letters, it's these three elements, and now we continue into Mishnah Gimel, which is the teli. The teli is a very complex word, which it could be. Let's talk about teli before we read that Mishnah. And by the way, I'm now looking in the commentary of the Gra. He actually says the things I was saying. I didn't see it before, where he says for example, Edim Nemanim, the trustworthy witnesses, he quotes Al Pi Shnayim Edim or Al Pi Shlosha Edim, the 2 or 3 witnesses that are called Edim Nemanim. And he brings both biblical and rabbinic literature to prove that. And again, it's his thesis is self-fulfilling in a way, because his language, because it's a synthesis really of Kabbalah and Mishnah and Talmud, it would seem to be Mishnaic in many ways, stylistically. Obviously not just a regular Mishnah, but there's common elements. But again, how much of that is his own editing, and how some of it's there before him, that's for sure. So it's interesting. So arguably, the Sefer Yetzirah came after the Mishnah. It seems like almost clear. I'm going to say that. But again, proof, perhaps not, but see, you don't need proof. You could just speculate, But speculatively, yes, it would seem that way. So let's look at this word for teli. Yeah, I don't see the teli is the dragon, according to the Vilna Gaon. So of the we call Drago in the constellation, and it's considered the source of other constellations.
It's a metaphor.
So apparently, yeah, it's a metaphor, but apparently the Vilna Gaon learns that it had to do with, I think Kaplan talks about it. It had to do with being able to kind of calculate positions, and based on that, so some people say it was, I think, the North Pole, or other people say it was the equator, that it was a certain position that they would use to try to figure out where the fixed stars are versus the stars that are not fixed. And the bottom line is, he says, it makes sense why we would call it the lave, the heart of the matter, meaning it's like the heart of heaven. It's like how we understand where things are in heaven based on where this constellation appears. Again, there's a lot of stuff on this, but that's all we are going to say for it now. Okay. And then he then connects that to the Sefirot of Tiferet, Yesod, and Bina. And the 3 that we talked about being connected to those Sefirot, and the Bina is the heart, so that would be the heart, the teli. Okay. Interestingly enough, when he gets to the 13 that are the constellations, he says that's like we usually have 12 constellations, but there's actually a way of saying 13, because sometimes we have a month, we have 13 months in the year in a leap year in a Jewish year. Okay. And then he says a bunch of other things that are 13, but that's classic Vilna Gaon. Okay. Just to bring up, he, like I said, he's a molder of bringing everything together, a unifier. So, Teli ba'olam kemelech al kiso, galgal b'shana kemelech b'medina, or ala choma, leiv b'nefesh kemelech b'machama. Now let's talk about this teli. The teli has 3 it's like a king in three positions. One is the king in his throne room. The second is the king in his amongst his people or on the wall, protecting his people. And the third is the king in battle. So what that could mean is very simple. A king could be in three positions. The strongest position is when everything is peaceful and all he has to be is the king sitting on his throne. That the center of the king's power is his gravity, is his kingship, being the king. He doesn't have to do anything. He just is the king, and everything that creates the order in the kingdom. So, in some sense, the tally in the world, meaning the tally, the way tally is in the universe, is just, it is in that king space of its throne. It is the throne of space, which everything else just revolves around. Call it gravity, call it what you will, call it relativity, whatever scientific word or spiritual word, Keter Malchut, perhaps. Then after that is when the king has to be Osek b'tzarchei tzibur. It has to be, a king is not just a king is to get involved in communal affairs. So there's arguments about between friendly people, meaning they're not enemies in the sense of foreign armies coming to wage war, but there's still disagreements, and the king has to judge, the king has to be amongst his people. So there's two ways of learning that. Either he's guarding his people, but I'm not going to learn like that. I'm going to be, he's with his people, helping them deal with their problems. But already in that sense, it's like, that's like the Tiferet, that's like the king that mediates between the Chesed and the Gevura. The king has to come out of his inner sanctum of just being the king, Akisem Mamlachto, on the seat of his kingdom, and he has to wear a hat a little bit as a judge. And the third level, which is the most dangerous, is when he goes into battle. He fights to defend his kingdom. So that's Olam is the first, Shana is the second, Nefesh is the third. It's interesting if you think about it. The king, as a representation of the physical center of the world, is he just belongs in the place of kingship. The king as the king in time has to be aware of changes in his kingdom. And finally, the king is a person. He has to fight like anyone else. He's still the king. It's his fight more than anyone else's fight, but it's still his fight. He can't allow it to just be fought by his military and his officers. Now,
Rabbi?
yes.
I heard this once, and again, I was just trying to push it back, but Olam begins with Ayin, right?
Correct.
And Shana, which is, so Olam is place or space.
Yes.
Shana is time, because, and then what was the third one?
Nefesh, self.
Nefesh,
soul.
which is soul. And so, but the letters spell Ashen, which is smoke, right?
Yeah.
Which ties into the sacrifices. I can't help any more than that.
Which is also like the fire that we talked about before, that what happens after the fire is the smoke, where it takes the physical and makes it into, it's according to maybe the Kabbalist, or it took out the water out of it took something out of the solid and just left the most basic matte part of it. Now we get into free choice, and we talked a little bit about this in an earlier chapter where we were talking about how you would think from reading sections, prolonged sections, the majority of Sefer Yetzirah, that Sefer Yetzirah is a book that embraces astrology, and by its very nature, that would mean its worldview is that of a deterministic view of who we are and what it is that we do, that it's determined by our birth dates, it's determined by where we live, our place in the world, and so on and so forth. But yet there are a number of places that are pretty clear that it doesn't believe that. It doesn't believe simply in astrology and determinism. It actually believes in good and evil as a choice that we make. And perhaps the way that we can read everything, and it's all leading up to the end of Sefer Yetzirah, or almost then, we're getting closer to then, which is that the physical and the spiritual, this type of matter and that type of the air and the fire and the water and the constellations and the king and all of these things are creating a perfect balance within the human experience that ultimately leaves us with free choice. And that's what I think the Sefer Yetzirah is saying. We'll read it and we'll discuss whether you agree with me. I'm happy for you not to agree with me, but that's how I read it. And if somebody has another way of reading it, that's fine. It's possible to read it in other ways. Perhaps you could say that it has the appearance of good and evil that one can choose, but ultimately one is either good or evil. But let's take a look at it for ourselves. So this is Mishnah 4. Gam ezeh le'umah zeh asa Elokim. And that's a verse in Ecclesiastes. Also, God made one opposite the other, which is usually understood to being, what we call the Yetzirah versus the Yetzirah, the good inclination versus the evil inclination. Tov l'umas ra, ra l'umas tov. In case you weren't sure, he spells that out. He spells it out more than you would think he needs to. Good opposing bad, bad opposing good. Tov mitov. Good from good, ra mira, bad from bad. Then he goes on and says, Hatov mavchen esara, the good either defines evil or clarifies evil or tests evil. V'hara mavchen es hatov, and vice versa. The evil defines good. This concept of that you don't have really good without bad or bad without good, night without day, day without night. So there seems to be a dualism here. That even good needs evil, and evil needs good. Then he says, Tova shmur l'tovim, b'ra shmur l'ra'im. Good is kept for good ones, and bad is stored away for evil ones, which could either mean one of two things. Very similar to the Talmud, doesn't show us that it is extracted from the Talmud, but similar to the Talmud in that there are similar expressions in Talmudic Medrash that I'm trying to see. You see what the Vilna Gaon is going to bring this stuff down. It's a lot of Vilna Gaon on this in the commentary. I already finished the Vilna Gaon. I didn't finish, but I didn't find what I wanted. Yeah, he does some Arizal and Zohar type things. Okay, that's not what I wanted. I wanted him to quote like Gemara, would have helped, like he was doing before. Okay. So we won't use the Vilna Gaon here, but there is this concept that it's in the Gemara, such as Sota, that, for example, even though the Gemara is not deterministic, the Gemara still says things like when you do something good, it opens up the door for more good to come. And if you do something bad, you've started a process where one bad thing, mitzvah, it's a Mishnah, mitzvah, goreres mitzvah, or schar mitzvah, but there's also mitzvah, goreres mitzvah. One mitzvah leads into another mitzvah, and one sin leads into another sin. And the Talmud really is heavy on that. So I would like to read this not as saying those that you're elected from birth to be good or to be bad. It's not your choice. And the good will continue to get better and to get reward for being good, and the bad are predestined to go to hell because that's just who they are. I don't read it like that. I read it like the Talmud, that when you do good, you open up the door for more good, and evil the opposite. That's how I read it. So the way I'm reading this is that God created a balance between good and evil. You need both of them. You can't have the true good without evil. Now, he wants to read one of the things that Aryeh Kaplan, who knew so much, but in particular, he was well versed in works such as the Ramchal, very well versed. I think he translated some of the Ramchal's work, including Derech Hashem. The premise of Derech Hashem is an earlier premise. It might even be here in the Sefer Yetzirah, which is the Tachlis Hatov, the ultimate in good, is to give people good that they create for themselves, that they're not receiving Nahama D'Chsufa, which means bread of shame, like a gift that they didn't have to work for. That's the ultimate, is to create good and evil, and you have the choice to be good, and it's not just something that's made, you're made to do good, and you have no choice in the matter. So I don't have the commentary in front of me, but I remember when I read Kaplan's commentary, he basically explains this Mishnah with the Ramchal, with the Derech Hashem. And the Derech Hashem is not unique. It's just really does the best job of explaining that concept. So again, in the beginning, I was like, oh, he's trying to fit the Ramchal here. But you know what? It doesn't have to be the Ramchal, the only way to explain it, but it could be explained. Look, they're good and evil. It's a battle. There needs to be a battle. There is a dualism in the world. There are things that take the dualism and smooth out the rough edges of the battle, like he talks about the synthesizer. So it's not just good versus evil, it's also the things in between. But there is a battle, and we have to choose between the good and the bad. So in my thinking, this is a very important Mishnah, perhaps the most important Mishnah for those who have trouble reconciling Sefer Yetzirah with the Rambam and understanding that, trying to figure out that we still have Bechira. And I would point to this Mishnah to say that the Sefer Yetzirah believes that we do have free choice. Anybody want to say anything on this Mishnah? Read it another way.
I kind of read it like completely the opposite.
Okay, go ahead. So tell us how you would read it.
Especially because he starts with quoting Koheles, or the text starts with quoting Koheles, which is, it has like the same Ishbitzian fatalism, like it has that ring to it. And so if he's building from there and saying, if the text is building from there and saying, look, this is the polarity, and evil defines good and good defines evil, though they're sort of reserved on separate sides, they're interdependent with one another. And it's not a matter of, like, if you read it with the very beginning of the next section, and it talks about the three mother letters, that each one stands alone, one as an advocate, one as an accuser, and one deciding between them. So we're not going to say that one of the mother letters acting as an accuser is like a bad thing to exist. So it seems like it's finding place for evil to like have a purpose within the system, rather than something to outright reject.
But let's assume it has a purpose. We can agree that it has a purpose. But how do you think that it's deterministic? Other than the thing from Kohelet, which arguably rabbinic literature always, one consistent thing they have is to take things, quotes are automatically out of context. There's no
Sure.
context, any context of rabbinic literature of quoting a biblical text or a text in Nach is minimal. It doesn't look at the chapter. It looks maybe at the words or two before and after it, and that's it. Nobody's interested in the philosophy of the Bible. In other words, no rabbi of self-worth in the Talmud quotes a pasuk and says, and we see from the rest of the book of Bereshis what it means. They don't do that. So
Sure.
you could be right that maybe Sefer Yetzirah isn't Rabbi Akiva. He didn't write it. So, he knows Koheles, and Koheles says a fatalistic thing. But most rabbinic styles of exegesis don't look at the whole picture. That's why it must be infuriating to any, Christian who looks at rabbinic literature like, how are they like, because the rabbinic literature takes one letter and one word and makes a whole story out of it, makes a whole tractate out of it. If they had to talk about the context of of more than that, just that pasuk, it wouldn't work.
Sure, but there's still pshat, right? You don't ignore the pshat.
You do. They redefine the pshat. In other words, of course there is pshat, but the definition of pshat isn't the broader context. It's maybe the context of the pasuk, at best. But okay, let's just say you're right. Let's just say that quote isn't a quote. Rabbinic literature would use that quote as free choice. That it comes from Koheles, they don't care. Understand? Like, you know who uses that quote a lot? Tanya uses that quote a lot. Believe me, he's not saying there's no free choice. On the contrary, it's all about free choice, right?
Right.
But okay, let's say you can't prove either thing from that pasuk. Some say we don't care what Koheles is, what their philosophy. By the way, the rabbis, they wanted to bury Koheles. So it's a proof that everything that Koheles says is discarded. We don't accept any of it. And because of that, we accept all of it. Right? They wanted to bury it. The only reason why they didn't is because of the last pasuk. So out of one pasuk, they saved the whole Koheles. It's a crazy idea, right? So now that we save it, we can take it and make it. We can cut it up for parts. It's like an old car is worth more for parts than it is for driving. Right? That's how you should understand Koheles. If you want to understand how the rabbis understand Koheles, you use the parts. The car doesn't drive, you cut it up and use it for parts.
It drives fine. It drives fine. It's a beautiful Sefer.
It's a beautiful Sefer, but the rabbis literally were willing to put it in the junkyard.
Yeah.
They only salvaged it for whatever. It's got such good stuff in it that they're like, we have to save this. We're going to save this.
Yeah.
And
There's
some
lots
people
of
will
books
still
like
read it
that.
and they'll think it's still the pshat,
Yeah.
They knew the pshat, they didn't like it. It's a terrible fatalistic book. Who would like that? We want to have happy endings and like the Disney.
But Ishbitz teaches us that fatalism is happy.
Okay, so that's a chiddush of Ishbitz, but we're not sure yet if the Sefer Yetzirah was Ishbitzer. I know you want to say he was.
Of course.
Maybe he was. Look, my argument is based on how I'm reading this, and it's not conclusive. I just think the fact that he situates it in the sixth chapter. The sixth chapter almost is nothing. I mean, chas v'shalom to say that, but like if you say, what was the fifth chapter all about? Well, it's about every month, what makes it special, what we do in that month, and who we are, what we can be, and what about the fourth chapter? It's all about the 7 days of the week and lining. What's the last chapter about? A recap? It is a recap, but it's also to like say, and you know where this puts you? It puts you in the driver's seat. It's almost like Koheles. The rabbis would have buried it, but they said, oh, look at this Mishnah. Keep it. It's a holy. Sefer Yetzirah is holy of holies. And then they didn't say that about Koheles. I said that about Shir Hashem. But you got where I'm going. Again, maybe it's because, I spend a lot of time with the Rambam, and I know that so many Jews are so influenced by the Rambam that they would look at the Sefer Yetzirah and they'd say, no, just don't bother with this. Maybe I'm trying hard on their behalf to help them reconcile it. But Zev, I hear you. You make some good points. Anything else?
No, that's about it.
Okay, you make some valid points. Again, you could read it like Zev and say, what is it? Electability? Is that the Protestant term? That God like elects those who are good, like he chooses. Elects is another word for choosing. God chooses you basically and makes you be chosen for good, or vice versa. So you could read it like that. I don't, but you can. Okay. Which, by the way, in defense of Ishbitz, there are ways of rereading the Gemara. The post Maimonides, it's hard to read certain Gemaras differently than he did. Like the ones that indicate there are free choice, where we read it with the Maimonides comment on it. But the truth is, there are ways, if we go back to pre-Maimonides, we could read the Talmud entirely different and reconcile it with Ishbitz. I've done it. The Talmud is not, it's not so clear. It's not clear that the Talmud is Maimonidean when it comes to free choice. It looks like it on the outside because we stopped analyzing it. But if you go back and analyze it, it's much more complicated. There are many Talmudic texts that point to the reasons that we could say that we don't really have free choice, and doesn't want to embrace that because it says that would be an excuse for bad behavior. But it's on the it deals with it and says, just be careful, We could say this, but we're not going to. Kind of like Ishbitz, Okay, let's go on because we have to finish this. Okay, we've got 3 more Mishnayot. Shlosha, Mishnah 5. Shlosha kol echad levado omed echad mizak v'echad mechayev v'echad mechriya ben time. 3. Each one stands alone. One is an advocate, one's an accuser, and one is a decider between them. And so those are the 3: the Aleph Mem Shin, the air, water, and fire, and so on. Shiva, out of the 7, right? The seven planets, 7 days of the week, or the 7 Sfirot of Chagas Nehim. So you've got Shlosha Mol Shlosha v'Echad Chok Machir Ben Time. You've got 3 opposing the other 3, and 1 as an intermediary between them. Now, when it comes to the 12, V'shnei Maser Omdim B'Machama, and you have 12 standing in war. Which, by the way, this still seems similar to what we were saying before about the king. The king in his chamber, the king on the wall or in his community, and the king waging war. So you have 12 stand in war. Or it could be that there's, war. There's peace and war here, as we'll see. 3 love, 3 hate, 3 give life, and 3 kill. Let me read that in Hebrew. Shosha Oavim, Shosha Sonim, Shosha Mechayim, Shosha Memisim. So it's 3 times 4, right? 3 love, 3 hate, 3 life, give life, and 3 give death. Let's break that down. Shlosha Oavim, who are the 3 that give love? Halev Aznaim. So there's 2 ways of reading it. In the Vilna Gaon's edition, it's the heart and the ears, because you've got 2 ears. But in the other edition, I think it says the heart, the mouth, and the ears. Okay. Shlosha Sa'onin, the 3 that cause hate. HaKavod v'hamar v'halashon. The 3 are the liver, the gall, and the tongue. 3 give life. Shosha Mechayim, Shnei Nikve Ha'af, the 2 nostrils, V'hatchul, and the spleen. Now we get to the 3 that kill. V'shlosha Mimisim, Shnei HaNikavim, V'hapeh. The 2 orifices and the mouth, which would explain why the Gruz version doesn't have the mouth for love. The Kel Melech Nem and Moshe B'Kulam, and the faithful God is king, ruling over all of them. Mima'on Kadsho Ad Adei Ad, from his holy abode until forever and forever, eternity of eternities. And then, because now we introduced the oneness of God, we're going to take that through all of the other numbers. Echel agabe shosha, 1 over the 3. Shlosha agabe shiva, the 3 over the 7. Shiva agabe shnei masar, the 7 over the 12. And by the way, these are also languages, right? There are the 7 doubles and the 12 elementals. I forgot to mention that as well. You have to go back when he's saying the 7, the 12. I'm not really explaining it because they each have their own chapter. Right, 7 is chapter 4, 12 is chapter 5. There's a whole chapter on what 7 is and what 12 is. I can't repeat the whole chapter each time. And a chapter on the 3.
Well, in the Kaplan, he does these charts. I don't know if that's at all clear.
I'll make you bigger.
Okay.
Let's see. So, that's to get to the 3 to the 7 to the 12. Yeah. That's more of but I'm talking about that too, meaning that's true, but I'm talking about we already had a whole chapter on what's going on in the world of 7s and the world of 12, whether it's the 12 of the cube or the 12 astrological signs of the zodiac and so on. Yeah. And now there's a new thing. Kaplan is, because in a way, look, if you're a commentator, what is he saying that wasn't already said other than just kind of bringing things back together? And he's doing a little bit of that by showing you a diagram like that. Okay. Let's continue. Eluhain, the Mishnah 6. Eluhain Esther Mishem Osil Shebehem Chakak Eya Yudke Vavke Elokim Yudke Vavke Tzvakot Elokim Tzvakot Kel Shaddai. Again, Yudke Vavke, all these different names of God. These are now we're just a whole summation of everything we've done. These are the 22 letters, right? We started out with the Sefer, the Sipur, the writing, the book, the story, the letters, right? We started out with those 3, and then we talked about the 22 letters and the 10 Sfirot, or whatever the 10 were, and the names of God. Okay, so here you've got 22 letters which were engraved, all of these names of God that he made the 3 books with. He created his universe. He formed them with, and whatever will be formed. And now here's the final Mishnah. What did Avram do? He came and he meditated. He understood. He looked, and he himself carved out. But also, he came up with the master plan behind creation. And that's what it means in the souls that he made in Haran, which might mean that he actually he recreated people. Maybe he actually made a golem out of these people. He became a co-creator. There's different ways of reading that. Right away, the Holy One, blessed be He, revealed Himself to him. Shmo. By the way, it's possible that Maimonides was versed in the Sefer Yetzirah, didn't accept it, but accepted what it had to say about Maimonides to some degree. because he has in Hilchos Avodah Zarah, he starts off with a lengthy introduction about the history of idolatry, and he uses Maimonides as a hero of science and rationality to discover that there is one God over idolatry. But some of that is possibly from Sefer Yetzirah. Take a look in the first chapter of Hilchos Avodah Zarah if you're interested. God put him in his lap and he kissed him on his head, V'kar Avram Avi, and he called him my beloved Abraham. V'karas brislo l'zar adolam, and he made a covenant with him and his family forever. Shenamar, v'hemim Hashem yachshavel lo l'tzedakah, lo tzedakah. He had faith in God, and God considered that a righteous thing. V'karas lo bris bein aser atzvos yadav. He made a covenant between the 10 fingers of his hand. V'hu bris halashon. This is referring to the chapter 1. That's the circumcision of the mouth. Ubein aser atzvot raglav, and between the 10 fingers of his toes, 10 toes of his feet, Fu bris hamila, and that is the circumcision of the membrane. V'kasher esem Hashem osius haTorah bilshono, which, by the way, that's 10 and 10 and 1 and 1. That's 22. No, it's no coincidence. Before we were all stressed out. That's 11 and not 10. And here the answer is we're actually not. It's not 11. It's 22. And he tied the 22 words of Torah onto his mouth, his tongue. And now he ties everything together that this chapter and all of Sefer Yetzirah said. He drew them in fire, he flamed them with fire. He agitated them with breath. He burned them with the 7 planets. He directed them with the 12 constellations. So basically, the covenant of Abraham is the revelation of the inner work of the Torah, which according to the Sefer Yetzirah is God's speech, which is manifesting until today into every physical. There is no physical thing that exists outside of God's speech. Science and everything is included in that. I'm going to make Yossi the host. I have to go to Minyan.